I'm Jan van Oers, and I work at Erasmus School of Economics, Department of Applied Economics. My main research and teaching is on labor economics, but over the recent years I've also done quite a lot of sports economics. I think I was always a student who put a lot of effort in his studying, but I also was sometimes very critical towards my back then teachers. Well, that was once when I had to do an assignment for one of these courses where I had to say something about the limited supply of silver. And the teacher wanted me to use in my essay how many years of silver there were left. And I said, that's impossible to answer. And then the teacher said, no, I want to insist because there are these numbers are available. And I said, but they're all wrong. There is an indefinite supply of silver. It will only get very expensive after a while. Well, if you ask me about what my best work is, I anticipated the question, so I thought about it and I didn't get a clear answer because it's not a best work. So if you ask me what type of publications are you happy about, there are several. One, I had a couple of publications about opium use in Indonesia, which used to be a former Dutch colony. I did some interesting research there on the price sensitivity of opium use. I looked at what happened to opium use when they changed the policy of the government. That's one area of research I like a lot. Then I did several types of papers about labor market institutions incentivizing unemployed workers to look for a job. And I did some things in sports economics. I looked at whether it makes sense to fire a football coach, and the main conclusion there is no, it doesn't make sense, but still it happens. Well, if you ask me about how I get to my research ideas, it's often by coincidence. So I was working on labor market issues, looking at transitions from one state in the labor market to the next state, so going from unemployed to employed. So finding a job or the other way around, losing your job. And then I realized I could apply the methodology also to drug use. So people don't use drugs when they're young, then they start using. So there is a transition from non-use to use, and then they may quit. Transition from use to non-use. And when I realized that's possible, I start looking for appropriate data. And sometimes it's coincidence. I meet someone at a conference, and then we start talking and say, oh, you're interested in this? Oh, that's interesting. I'm also very curious about this type of research, and then sometimes cooperations start and so on. Well, if you ask me about my favorite courses or teaching, I teach sports economics and I teach labor economics. And I don't have a specific preference one over the other. I do like some topics more than others. So when I teach a labor course, I like to talk about the minimum wage because it is simple in its setup. It's like a floor to everyone, but it has some interesting implications depending on how you think that the labor market is organized. If I talk about sports economics, I like to talk about dismissal of coaches, because I've done some work on that, and I try to show to the students that it doesn't make sense, and I try to provide a motivation while it still happens. I try to think a lot about providing good slides, good overheads, which make sense in the logic. I try to come up with many examples of today. The minimum wage, well, there's discussion here in the Netherlands about the minimum wage, whether it's gone up recently. That sort of try to show that what I'm talking about means something in real life. Well, my life motto is you should enjoy what you're doing. So I supervise thesis a lot, and I try to get students in such a state of mind that they actually are enjoying writing a thesis and not seeing it as an obligation which they have to fulfill to obtain a certain grade or something. So they actually should enjoy what they do.